Delighted to be joined first up by Julianne Genter, the Greens Finance spokesperson. Julianne, Budget 2022, what's hot and what's not?
There's no question, being a climate budget, that the Greens have had a significant impact. Our Green ministers have worked constructively to get some really excellent funding initiatives and a kind of historic investment in reducing emissions. And we would be the first to say it's also not enough. It's not a Green Party budget in the least. It doesn't do enough transformation to lift incomes, to make the tax system fairer, or to really tackle climate change. But we are proud of what we've achieved.
So obviously most of the climate change announcements were made on Monday. They were contained in the budget today. As the Green Party Finance spokesperson, the biggest highlight for you out of that suite of announcements?
Transport, and that's something the Greens campaigned on and I worked on as a minister last term, so it's great to see that become a reality. Slight extension to half-price public transport fares. We would have liked to see that go a lot further for longer.
Do you think
working towards free public transport?
Do you think the government will increase that in 2 months' time?
I think it would be wise to do so. It's hard for me to know if that's what the choice they will make. Like quite a good investment in nature and protecting nature. Then in energy, we have the Warm Up New Zealand scheme, and the payment that they've put out to help people with inflation is like an extension to the winter energy payment, which is a policy that the Greens put forward as well at the last election.
So what did you make? I mean, obviously inflation has skyrocketed up in the last year. We're talking 3 months, $350 per individual earning less than $70,000. So if you've got two earners earning less than $70,000 in a household, it'll be $54 a week. Time limited. Do you think that's enough?
I think it's good. I think it is good. And if you combine that with some of the other funding that they've put into initiatives to try and reduce the cost of living, it does start to add up to be quite a lot. I mean, if the Greens were doing it, we probably would have gone for a more universal, simple payment rather than choosing to take away petrol tax, and some of the other areas where they've made changes. So I think probably what's missing is support for those on the absolute lowest incomes, and that would be beneficiaries. They're going to be hit by inflation the worst. So we would like to see more action in work tax credit, more of a package to lift more kids out of poverty, and probably rent controls as a short-term stopgap to deal with rent inflation. So it's good. There's some good stuff in there, and obviously the Greens would have gone a lot further.
Yep. The other big area today was health. An extra, I think, $13.2 billion over the next 4 years. Getting rid of DHB deficits, and I guess rebasing the funding for the new RNZ, big sort of nationalised health provider. What did you think of it?
I think it's good. I think that it's really important that we find a way to make sure that funding is getting through to the people who really need it. And I think one of the things I found as an associate health minister last time was, we got a big increase to maternity funding. It's not clear that all of that got through to midwives. So it's really going to be a question.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, as a former associate health, what happened? Where does it go? Where does it go? Yeah.
I haven't figured out where that funding went, but I hope eventually it's going to make its way to primary maternity services. Some of it did. I mean, but not all of it. So there's no question our health system needs a boost in funding, that health workers are often not paid enough, and so we're struggling to fill those jobs and to get safe staffing levels for nurses. Did you see
any evidence? Did you see any evidence in the new funding today that some of that was going to go into wage and salary of the lowest paid employees in the system?
Well, we did have that announcement about the admin staff, which I think was quite good. Admin and clerical are getting a pay equity settlement, and so that's going to be a pretty substantial increase to incomes for those people, so that's good. And I would say that while we always think of the specialists, the frontline health workers, and they're very important, the hospitals and health services wouldn't work with administration staff, and so we do need to pay them appropriately as well. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think it remains to be seen whether all of this funding in the health system will translate into improved health outcomes, but the government is certainly trying.
Just stepping back for a moment and thinking about the broader global sort of situation. Obviously, we have a significant amount of inflation here. There's supply chain shortages sort of emanating out of China. There's inflation all around the world. In New Zealand, it appears there's sort of capacity constraints. The economy isn't going to be able to grow that much more quickly. Do you think that this is a budget that is suited for the times?
Well, I think that most, not all, of the inflation that we are facing is a global phenomenon, and so it's not primarily driven by government spending. So I don't think that there's a huge risk to inflation from the government spending we're seeing now. We're not that out of step with our other partners, other countries in the OECD. Where it is driving inflation is probably the major infrastructure construction projects. So like the NZ Up program, which was deliberately designed to stimulate the economy, hit a sector that was at capacity, and that's just resulted in cost increases for major projects. And I think probably the government should be looking at ways to dial that back or defer some of that, particularly in light of the emissions reduction plan and the carbon budgets.
And that was that New Zealand upgrade plan, that was primarily roads, the one announced in early 2020, right?
Yeah, that was announced in early 2020, and most of those major projects have seen massive inflation. The other area where we've seen inflation is housing, and so that's where the Greens would say, well, you can continue spending, but actually we need to raise some more revenue, and a wealth tax would be a perfect way to do that, to make the tax system fair. It would help cool, it would have stopped the kind of rapid increase in house prices that we saw last year, and it would have raised revenue. So I think that would have been a win-win situation. But you've got to pair that, I suppose, with something like rent controls while government's working to increase the supply of housing.
So any other observations? Anything else you'd like to add from today's budget? Anything that sort of caught your eye?
I think it's it's doing a lot of good work for the climate, for nature, for inequality, but it's still it's just sort of a slight incremental improvement. And what we really need is a step change to deal with these massive global headwinds with the climate crisis. And that's what the Greens want to see, obviously, after the next election.
Julianne Genter, thank you so much for joining us.